If we are to attack Dr. Abel Damina for saying before Ibiome got born again, he has already been in ministry, then we should also hold Pastor David Ibiome responsible for the speech and the manner of words that he used to Dr. Abel Damina. Welcome back to the Harris House YouTube channel. It's been a little long while. I've not been posting anything, and it's not that I have anything to post, but I've been tired, not seeing the 1,000 subscribers, not seeing the million views, and it's really tiring and not encouraging sometimes. But then we keep showing up. So I'm here again, and today I want to be talking about a very dicey topic, and some people might call it a controversial topic. I want to talk about this whole Honest Bunch podcast that Pastor Dr. Abel Damina was invited to, and the whole issue that has been coming up with it. In this video, I'll be talking about 6 specific things. It may be more than 6, but I have 6 specific things I want to talk about that emanated from the podcast. Now, before I go ahead, kindly hit the subscribe button if you have not subscribed to this YouTube channel. Hit the like button, and at the end of this video, do recommend this video to your friends and family by sharing this video and also letting me know what you think, your opinion in the comment section. Now, let's dive right into the whole subject matter. Now, the first thing I want to cover is the question that came up when he was announced as the next guest. So when Nedu Wazobia FM posted Dr. Damina as the next guest, a lot of people came up with different talk and different things. A lot of them were like, why will a pastor be going to a Honest Bunch podcast? Why will a man of God be sitting with sinners? A very particular one I saw, it's caught me off guard. I did not screenshot it, but I saw a particular one that said, why will a pastor be going to sit where Ashawo sits to be discussing with them? Before I even answer that question, it's on record that Dr. Abel Damina is not the first man of God that is being invited to the Honest Bunch podcast. Pastor Olumide Emmanuel has been invited. Pastor Gabriel Eziashi has been invited to the podcast. I think about 3 pastors has been invited to the podcast. Dr. Abel Damina would be the 4th pastor that will be invited to the Honest Bunch podcast. Now, my question is, if it is wrong for a pastor to be invited to such podcast, why wasn't this uproar raised when the first 3 men of God were invited to the podcast? Now, let's remove humans aside from it. Let's relate this thing with Christ. Now, if we say he should not go to where sinners are, then we are the biggest hypocrites that I have ever seen. Because in the lifetime journey of Jesus, Jesus mingled with the sinners a lot. He was with Zacchaeus. He spent time in his house. The Pharisees were like, why would he be spending time with sinners? The prostitute came to him, and the people around were like, why will he be allowing prostitutes? So if Jesus was able to mingle with the sinners, why is it a crime for someone like Dr. Abel Damina to mingle with the Honest Bunch podcast crew or honor their invites? If he's wrong, then I feel mingling with the unbelievers that Jesus did was absolutely wrong as well. That's just my own opinion. Then again, the Honest Bunch podcast, I see it as a platform to either give credibility to nonsense or give credibility to what makes sense. So Dr. Abel Damina honoring that invitation is just using that platform to spread the gospel or whatsoever message he has to portray to the world. So it's not as if it's a wrong thing to do. There is nothing absolutely wrong in him honoring that invitation. Which brings me to the next question. A lot of things flying online is that Dr. Abel Damina drags social pastor. Now, I took my time to watch the podcast from the very beginning to the very end. And in the course of the podcast, some names were mentioned. Pastor Jerry Eze, Pastor Paul Eneshe, Pastor David Ibiome was mentioned. For the discussion here, I'm going to be sticking to three names that were mentioned and one that was subtly mentioned. It was not mentioned, but it was mentioned. When they ask about a certain pastor who said he went to heaven and did this and did that. It was not stated, but definitely we know it was being talked about. Pastor E.A. Adeboye, when a comment came that he went to heaven and he drank tea with God. Now, did Abel Damina drag Adeboye on the Honest Bunch podcast about drinking tea with God? I will state it categorically that there was no dragging in my perspective. Now, what he did was saying that your experiences with God should not be a basis for teaching the children of God. Now, if your experiences does not align with scripture, they should be kept at one corner or thrown away. Now, I don't see anywhere he said he dragged Pastor E.A. Adeboye. This brings me to the second name that was mentioned, Pastor Jerry Eze. Is there any connection of dragging Pastor Jerry Eze in the whole Honest Bunch podcast and everything? And even before the Honest Bunch podcast, I know he has been saying something like there are plenty arranging miracles. When he's talking about the arranging miracles, I don't think he has ever pointed out and said Pastor Jerry Eze is doing arranging miracle, Pastor Paul Eneche is doing arranging miracle. His statement when asked about fake miracles was this. He said, most of these arranging miracles. There was nowhere he pointed out that so person or so person did so. Now, what he actually pointed out was that when you see certain crusade and they are having the same brand of clutches, the same brand of wheelchairs, there was no mention or attack to anybody. And in this scenario now, I feel if anybody is attacked because of his explanation, then possibly that person has some skeleton in his cupboard. I don't know. But that is just my own view on that subject matter. Now back to Pastor Jerry Eze. The only thing that Dr. Damina had in respect to Pastor Jerry Eze was the phrase, what God cannot do does not exist. There are different people with different ideologies of the meaning of what God cannot do does not exist. Even on the podcast, they were asking him, was it an English problem? He gave his own perspective of why the statement, what God cannot do does not exist. He gave his own perspective and he left it at that. He never dragged anybody and claiming to be over somebody or somebody. Which brings me to the next point before going back to the next person that was mentioned. There are a lot of write-up concerning the fact that he said, Pastor Jerry Eze is my son's son. He's the son to my son, and I'm way beyond him. Let's reason this thing together with an open mind. If he had said he is my son, a lot of people would have still dragged him because they will ask, where did you disciple him? When did you ordain him? How is he your son? Now, he cannot claim him to be his son, but he is a son to his son, which is actually a factual and a right statement, in my own opinion. And saying the fact that I am way beyond him, I don't think there's any problem with that because I feel before Pastor Jerry Eze started ministry, Abel Damina has already been in ministry. So if we are going to judge by that, he is way beyond him. Now, I think nobody will see it wrong if I say something like, or anybody say something like, he is the father to my father. He is my spiritual grandfather and he is way above me. Nobody will see it wrong, but because he said he is my son's son and I'm way ahead or something like that, people are picking offense. I don't know what people think about that, but to me, I feel it's just a factual statement that has nothing wrong in it. After all, other fathers of faith do say he is my son, he's my son's son. There has not been any issue of dragging or why will he say he's my son's son. This brings me to the next person that was mentioned, who is Pastor Paul Eneche. Did Abel Damina drag Pastor Paul Eneche on the Honest Bunch podcast? Because what I see online scares me. I'm not even thinking if it's the same Honest Bunch podcast that I watched that people are analyzing. Now, what brought Pastor Paul Eneche name on the podcast was clarification of facts. Over and over time again, the issue has been trending on social media on so person or then so person. So Dr. Abel Damina is just trying to set the statement, set the facts right, that this is what happened, this is how it is. That was the mention of Pastor Paul Eneche in the whole podcast. And in doing that, he gave dates, he gave time, he gave the names of people that were in the setting. Most people will be like, why is he doing that? Why is he dragging who or then who? Now, one thing we should know is this, that before being men of God, and even as they are men of God, these people are humans. Now, there are some things you would do that people will be saying other things about you that will get to you, and you have no other thing to do than to set the record right. I know a lot of people will be saying he's a man of God, he should focus on preaching the gospel and stop thinking of setting records straight. See, the truth is this: whether man of God or whether boy of God or whether a honorary member, things do get to us. And when it happens, since we are still humans, there is every tendency that we will respond to these things. And in responding to this Pastor Paul ordination and everything, I did not see any dragging as that. He just stated the fact and made the fact plain the way it is. That leads me to the next person. That is the last person that was mentioned, who is Pastor David Ibiome of Salvation Ministry. Now, in mentioning him, he made a statement which was placed at the beginning of the podcast, which everybody is talking about, that before he started ministry, Pastor David Ibiome was not born again. That is what everybody is speaking and running with. You should know the fact that there is something we call media sensation. People who are on media, who are on public relation and advertisement, they know these things. They know if you put something to trigger the mind of people, it will cause them to talk about it, thereby giving relevance to the topic and picking the attention of other people to want to come and see. That was what was done there. Now, some people will be like, why will he be doing comparison? I don't see it as a comparison. It's a factual statement that he made, because according to Damina, he started ministry in the 1980s. And I don't think Pastor David Ibiome had started ministry or had thought of starting ministry at that time. So it is a factual statement that was made. And what happens when statements are made is either the statement will be debunked or the statement will be what? Accepted. So since he said he started ministry before Pastor David Ibiome became born again, if it is a lie, it is for who the statement was directed to come out and say, this statement that was made is a lie. And one thing we keep trying to push away to the corner is this: before this person is speaking out like this, we are not considering the speech of the second person, because before he responded like that, he had seen clips of Pastor David Ibiome saying he is a rat and a rat cannot give birth to his son. So when those derogatory statements were used, nobody brought it out, nobody talked about it. But his own response back to that statement is being given a lot of attention and is being seen as if he's doing competition and everything. If we are to attack Dr. Abel Damina for saying before Ibiome got born again, he has already been in ministry, then we should also hold Pastor David Ibiome responsible for the speech and the manner of words that he used to Dr. Abel Damina. If we are going to be fair in this, that is what I think. So I feel in this whole thing, I don't know the podcast that people are watching and that they say he dragged other ministers. I did not see the dragging. You can as well point it out to me. I'm very open-minded to listen and check back. You can point the timestamp and I will definitely go and check it. Then this is what I'm going to say to people. Don't base your judgment on what you've already formed in your head, what has been formed by what you heard from others. I'm not saying you must go and watch the podcast, but if you will watch that very podcast, I will implore you to see the podcast with an open mindset. Open your mind and see the podcast and listen to everything. Now, most people will be like, oh, what message? I saw a comment where somebody was like, what message did he go there to preach? He just went there to talk nonsense, dragging people. I was like, for a whole 2 hours and 40 minutes, that was all you could pick. I will answer a question that someone asked, that what message did he preach? Now, he taught about marriage. He taught about the ground for divorce. He taught about correcting the prosperity gospel that we have, which is not right. Prosperity and transactional gospel. So in the whole 2 hours, 40 minutes of the podcast, if the only thing you could get from the whole clip, the whole podcast was that Dr. Abel Damina dragged so person, then I think you either watched the podcast with an idea that is already formed in your head by yourself, or from the statement of some other people you follow. That is what I'm saying. If you would definitely watch this podcast, or you've watched it but didn't watch it with an open mindset, I will implore you that when you are seeing it, or when you want to see it again, go with an open mindset. Now, if we leave all this part and go to the comment section of the podcast, you will see people talking about how the podcast has been an eye-opening for them, how it has been answering some questions that they have. Now, the final note, let me make this very clear that I'm not 100% in acceptance of whatever he says. Now, if you are a minister, or you are one of those people who does not agree with what Dr. Abel Damina says, it's not about throwing tantrums and calling names. What you should do, I'll give you two things you can do. The first one is either be like the Berean Christian, listen to him, cross-reference whatever he says with the scripture he gave to find out if they are correct. And if they are correct, you know what to do to either accept or reject it. If they are not correct, you also know what to do either to accept or reject it. Number one, which is to be like the Berean Christian. Then the second thing you can do is to come out publicly and do a scriptural backing to whatsoever you feel is the correct one. Teach us. A lot of us are open-minded to hear what you want to say, want to hear whatsoever anybody wants to say. So it's either you be like the Berean Christian, listen to him and cross-reference with your scripture, or you come out with what you think or what you know is the right thing, as opposed to the wrong thing that Dr. Abel Damina has been teaching. Now, I will end this video here, and I would like to hear from you in the comment section what you think about this video, what you think about the podcast. And if you've not subscribed, kindly hit the subscribe button, like this video, share, and I'm waiting to read from you. This is the end of the video. Peace out. I remain Harry Sampson. Bye.